is Vicki Robinson, and this meeting is being recorded. And we are doing that so that later we can share the presentation to those who didn't get a chance to join in with us. So if you like what we share and you want to have someone else hear the presentation afterwards, please contact us and we will make sure that we get that information to you to get to the right link to be able to do that. So Vicki Robinson is my partner, and she's taking over a lot of the management things and the chats and so forth over on the side. So we are delighted that we can be working together. I am a company called Learning Props, and Vicki is with Lone Stars, and we are working together to advance the ideas that we have with playing games and learning. If you have a need at the end of the session for continuing ed credits, let Vicki know. She'll give you a certificate for that. And also Vicki was going to share with you, or should have shared with you today, that you may have received the handout for this session. It's just 8 slides I selected to be some key ideas to remember. And she's also going to share that in the chat. So if you can find it in one place or the other, you can kind of follow along with some of the ideas that will be shared there. So the basic ideas, and this is one of the ideas that's on the slide, on the handout, is learning should be fun. And secondly, games can enrich learning. Educators can utilize gameplay, and families can build on learning with games. So those are the key ideas we're going to cover and talk about and expand upon in our session today. So as to why am I leading this session and what gives me the right to talk about learning and games? I was an educator. I worked in a public library for a short while. And then I was honored to get into a position called a parent involvement coordinator, which forever changed my life. And that position showed me more than ever that parents were very much an influence on how their students were doing in school. And one of the things that the program that I worked with, it was a state pre-K program. We served about 350 children in the program. What we saw was that parents enjoyed the activities that we gave to them. So on a home visit, we would take out a little kit that my department created and gave to the teachers to take out. It was some kind of an activity, and it was also a book. And at the end of the years, we reviewed the things that had worked really well. That kept coming back from parents that they really enjoyed our giving them those kits. We thought, well, we could make more of them, but there was a budget limitation. And so we decided we would continue to share games and kits with families that always contained a literacy piece. And we would send them out more like the public library did, in a lending library kind of manner. And that became so effective. Eventually, we had about 3,000 kits shared per year to our families. And we had about 500 different kits that we were in the process of circulating to our families. So the idea grew and grew. And out of that, we recognized that some things were more successful than others. And right at the top of that list was games. So I became the creator of educational games and books and other parent involvement resources as I worked with families and found out there were holes in the kinds of resources I had to work with. I eventually wrote a book called A Menu for Building Family Partnerships. COVID in 2020 gave me a chance to republish that. I have published 11 different games in English and in Spanish English, and that required 11 books to go in the game bags. And we offer the books in 4 languages. They're offered available in English, Spanish English, Arabic English, and Chinese English, because every family deserves the respect of having resources in their own language. I've done some consulting work in both Ohio and Wisconsin, and I've done a lot of workshops and training. So that's what I offer to this presentation. So as we go through, I'm going to be asking you to give a moment of reflection to say, what concepts are you practicing with the learners that you work with? And again, I'm going to ask you to jot those ideas down so that you can come back to those ideas later. So what are the concepts you want them to be practicing or learning? And then as we go through the session, I'm going to ask that you adopt 3 different ideas, something you want to take back. And I know that some of you are still in the midst of summer breaks. Some of you are already gearing up for the year and your minds are filled with many things. If you jot the ideas down, you're much more likely to be able to take action or to add it to the good practices you already have in place. So play and game. I'm going to use those words kind of back and forth today. Game emphasizes the idea it's a form of a play or a sport, and it usually has some rules, and the outcome can be decided by a skill, a strength, or luck. But we learn through play, and we can have fun. And play enriches the experience that we have as we interact with each other. This webinar is going to focus on interactive games, not onto electronic game playing. There is value to electronic games, and many people are getting very, very involved in interactions with computers and other people via games, but I'm really going to stress, especially for our early learners, the importance of the hands-on nature. So games can be simple and they can be very low cost. Games invite social emotional interactions as people interact with each other, and learning can happen while playing games. Games encourage practice of social skills. Adults can guide and encourage social behaviors. That adult could be a teacher, it could be a parent, it could be a grandparent, it could be an after-school director, it could be a childcare provider, it could be a librarian. There are so many different people who will guide and encourage those social behaviors as games are played. Play needs to be appropriate to the development level and age of the child. The real engagement of children in terms of playing games and taking turns does not really evolve until about the age of 3. Once in a while, if a child has lots of those experiences at home, they might be ready for it at an earlier age. And some children who don't have those exchanges might not be ready for it until they're 4. There's something I call the age rule. And the age rule goes that the number of players should match the child's age. So if you're working with 3-year-olds, 3 children in a group is a really great number. Or if you're working with 4-year-olds, 4 will work fairly fine. Of course, there can be adaptations to that as well. And another age rule is the amount of time it takes from one turn to the next. If you're 3, waiting much beyond 3 minutes is not very likely. So if the game takes longer to have each person have a turn than 3 minutes, you probably need to make some adaptations to make the game flow a little bit smoother and faster. And in all development, understand there are always variances to any given rule. So we're going to start with playing a game. So the game I'm going to have you play is a word game. I will give you 1-word clues, and I'm going to ask you to try to guess the word. So the first clue is fruit. The second clue is red. The third clue is maraschino. The fourth clue is Bing. Did you get it? I was giving you hints for cherry. Right? We're going to try it again, but now it's your turn. I'm going to ask you to think of clues for others that they would use to try to guess the word elephant. So think of a couple of different words that you might choose for them to guess that word. Okay, these are some of the ideas I came up with. Dumbo, African, Asian, trunk, pachyderm, jungle, tusk, zoo. How do you think it worked? Would somebody have guessed from the words that you gave? What does a child learn playing duck, duck, goose? I sure wish we were all together and I could have discussion, but use your imagination here for a minute and just think, what will a child learn playing the game of duck, duck, goose? My thinking was, first of all, they're going to follow directions. Somebody gets to go around patting their friends on their head until you say goose, and then they get to chase after you. There's some decision making. When am I going to say that word goose? There's turn taking. You have to wait patiently sitting on the floor You can't just get up and run after the other person until it's your turn, until you've been called on. There's often a level of fairness, and that's usually done by the adult leader. Pick someone who hasn't had a turn. Make sure everyone gets a turn. You will hear that terminology by all the leaders because we think that everybody should get a turn playing a game. And there's a certain amount of listening I have to be paying attention so that when that word changes from duck to goose, that I know it's time to go. So adapt duck, duck, goose to other kinds of extending learning. So let's say, for example, we're working on some movement where we can flap our wings like a bird and gallop like a horse. So I go around tapping people on the head as I flap my wings and say, bird, 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 until suddenly I come up with the word horse. Or we can have children come up with their own words of how they want to travel about the circle and use words. What about a number count? Tap people on the head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until they decide to say, catch me, and then they run. You could do days of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and suddenly say August, and it's time for someone to chase you. What about friends' names? As children at the beginning of the year getting acquainted with each other, could they tap each other on the head and use their names? And then suddenly call someone Fred when there's no Fred in the circle, and then it's time to chase. What about letter names? A word that begins with that letter or a sound that that letter makes. We can reinforce all of those ideas, repeating that same duck, duck, goose kind of game. There are different types of games. There's what I call no prop games, things like hide and seek and I spy, duck, duck, goose, rock, paper, scissors, things that we can just break into without needing any additional resources. The second level is what I call simple prop games, things that are played with balls, for examples, or things played with a feather. So this is a game I would play if we were in the same room together, and you're going to just have to try it anyway. I've never tried this on a computer screen before, but we're going to give it a try. I'm going to ask you to snap your fingers, clap your fingers, and put your hands over your ear. So snap, clap, put your hands over your ear. Now you're going to have a race. You are going to see if you can beat the feather. So I'm going to drop this feather, and you're going to see when I say go, if you can do those three things. Okay, ready, set, go. Ah, it flew all the way over to the side. Oh no, I'm gonna try it one more time. This time I'm gonna make sure I drop it a little closer to the camera. Ready? You're gonna snap, clap, and cover your ears. Did you see the feather go? Shouldn't have the air conditioning running, should you, when you try to put a feather through the room? But I play that game with kids all the time because it helps them to sometimes settle down. If I'm in circle time and they're not paying attention, I can get a feather out and we can do a couple of activities that require them just plain sitting and doing things in order to release some of that excess energy. But the race is between the object, the feather, and the child. If I say, oh, you beat the feather, then I'm going to have to answer it for every child in the program. So instead, you need to make sure that they're the one to decide, well, did you beat it? Did you beat it? And you can always repeat the race again to see if they did, that they can be watching the second time to see if they beat it. So simple prop games are things we use when we transition. They are things that we can use in instructional. There are so many different ways that those simple props can become the focus of a game. And then there's another level of game called manufactured games, things that have specific components. In that realm, there would be dominoes, there would be Monopoly, there would be all those board games you walk down a shelf and see. So I'm going to tell you about the I Spy lesson that I had. We were kind of short in our program with space, and this little vehicle, a camper type thing, was parked in our parking lot because the motor wasn't running too well and it wasn't roadworthy, but it was great for an extra space. And so my classes were being held in there with a group of parents. And this group of parents had their youngsters in the building with some extra enrichment time with a teacher. And we were doing some instruction, trying to help the parent to improve their interactions and help to build some school ready skills. So the parents weren't particularly on this one day paying close attention to me. And I said, Ridley D, I see something you don't see. It worked perfectly well. They all heard it and they went, "What did you say?" And so I had to explain the game of what I call I Spy. I just grew up with it, calling it Riddly Dee. And as a result, we played the game. Everybody in the room had a chance to play it with something that was in our camping space, in our instructional space. So I said, go home this week and I want you to give me a report about it next week. And they came back the second week and I said, well, did you play it? And no, we hadn't mastered that yet. So we introduced it again. And this time I passed books out and everybody took a book and they had to play with a partner, identifying different objects on the page using color. So the third week they come back, did you do it? Did you do it? And when eyes droop down to the floor and look away from you when you ask a question, you can be pretty sure that it didn't happen. And like baseball, you give it 3 whacks and you see what happens. So we played it one more time. And this time we looked out of the windows and we looked around our surroundings and we played it with things outside like you would do if you were in a bus or a car. So we had played the game I Spy 3 different times. And I do know that about a month later, they weren't particularly paying attention to me again. And I said, Riddly Dee, I see something you don't see and it's round. It worked. They all stopped and they went, you can't change the rules. It's about colors. And I said, we're going to do it with shapes. Can't we do it with shapes? And so we all played it again with shapes. And I do not remember going back to that game during the rest of the year. But in May, when we did the evaluations, my director called me into the office and she said, I don't understand what the parents are saying. And the question was, what's something you learned this year? And we had many variations of I Spy, I See, Riddly Dee. There were so many variations, but that's what they remembered. So the lesson I learned that year was invite families to play games, equip parents with the game ideas or resources to use, and revisit and repeat the games introduced. How often do you repeat it? Until it becomes a habit in what they do. So games provide opportunities to communicate with each other, relate or interact, develop social skills, ideas like taking turns and following rules and accepting the status. I might be playing Candyland and I might be very disappointed that I didn't end up on the right color or on the right piece of candy, but I have to learn to accept that and move on and have my next turn. What about regulating and self-control? I have to wait for my turn. We have to learn to manage interactions in a socially and acceptable way. Reinforce and develop skills, for example, counting. PAP games are reported in research as being very, very helpful for children practicing numbers. What about motor skills or reading skills that can be a result of playing games? Or encourage some kind of thinking challenges. If you've ever played the game trivia or a game of guessing of that nature and you miss an answer, think how often your mind goes back to the next day. Oh, I really remember that word. I remember that clue. I remember that idea. So ideas stick with us after we've played games. What are the elements of a game? Usually some kind of rules, but they are adaptable. Competition. Yes, games do sometimes have competition, but you can downplay it. You can play until everyone has a turn, until everybody finishes the game. So decide whether you want that competition or not, but that's part of the give and take that games do have the opportunity to teach children. Usually there's some kind of manipulatives or resources, a risk or an unknown. We never know when we get to have that magic card that tells us to go ahead or when we get to miss a turn. So that risk or unknown does add some elements of fun to games and fun. And along the way, a skill and a challenge opportunity. So what are some games that you might be familiar with? And I just rattled off a list of different things here. It's so easy to take games that we're familiar with and adapt them in a way that can make them interactive. When we asked parents about the kits we were sending home from our school on that lending library I talked about it in the first slide, we found that they really liked the ones that had an element of game, that parents tended to begin the game and stick with it until the end. So we introduced a lot of bingo games, and we created path games, and we created different kinds of card games, concentration. What about fishing or dominoes, games with balls, or even TV style games? I didn't realize it until years later and was suddenly reminded of it again this year. The first graduate course I took after graduating from college was how could I use games to teach the students in the classroom to review concepts. And we created some kind of TV type games and picked categories and got to answer questions to help us build on those review skills. So path games is one I want to talk about. It's just one very, very easy style of game to be able to utilize. So here's some examples of it. Trouble is a great idea for path games. And what I like about Trouble for especially young learners is there's a hole for every piece, so that one-to-one correspondence that we talk about in math, it's so easy to accomplish because there's a hole for every single space, and they have to touch or put their mover in each one to be able to count them. Also, ingenious designer who came up with that game, that Pop-O-Matic in the middle, you never lose the dice for playing Trouble. You might lose some of the pieces, but you never lose the dice. So it adds an element of fun to it as well. The lower left is a picture of a path game that we created as a workshop. Parents came in, and it was near Halloween time, as you can tell by the ghost and the haunted kind of look in the upper right-hand corner that one of the parents added that to. We simply took round stickers and we made a path game. We provided milk lids as the place movers, and then we provided them a dice, which didn't get in this picture for some reason. On the right is an example of one of the path games that I created. Again, we found that path games got a certain length of time that people tended to stay from beginning to end doing it. So this is a game about body parts that I created. We went from file folders that were laminated to fabric to sheets that were printed at a silk screener in our community, just a flat mat. And eventually we found that we could make them an enclosed case. And so what you see in the background is really a zippered bag that contains the game mat on the inside and a book that goes with it. And again, dice and movers to play it. So there are a total of 11 that I do in English or bilingual Spanish English, and I'll tell you a little bit more about those later, but gives you the idea, the variety of themes and topics we could talk about. We had one called Where Will You Find Me? Because that's what our speech teacher said. We need one that's language enrichment. And we had one called Play Action because it was motor skills and movement related, which are verb words, which are important parts of sentence structure. So each one had a theme and a purpose to it. Why are games important? Look at all the ways it enriches the brain. So take that Trouble game that we were just talking about, and starting on the lower left, is there some hearing? Is there sound somehow involved in Trouble? Pop-O-Matic makes a little bit of noise. People are chatting and counting. So there's some verbal happening. Is there some planning? Which piece do I move? Do I move this one? Do I move that one? Do I start a new piece, or do I finish the pieces that are on the board before I start another piece out? Is there some speech that evolves because of it? Is there some motor control, moving the pieces? Is there some kind of senses being used? Are you feeling things? Is there something visual? Is there language again? All parts of the brain can be stimulated by one simple game. Build play capacity, stage play opportunities intentionally. Introduce the play resource, both to the children or to families. Teach families or play leaders to, first of all, observe what's going on with the game, and then to talk about it, comment, use I statements or describe actions. I see so-and-so got a number 3. Let's help them count to 3. We can say, so-and-so moved to this new space. Let's see what it says. So describe what's going on and the actions the children are taking, but participate with meaningful guidance. Don't just distract the children, but help them, guide them through the playing process. Consider even using games for assessment. So on the lower right is a picture game that I created. It's a path game. It was to practice colors. I would have parents so often say to me, oh, well, we know all of our colors. but I would know from classroom assessment that no, we didn't know all the colors. So if the parent can play the game and can see the process that a student perhaps doesn't know all 11 colors, they then can set goals and they can move towards practicing with their youngster. Parents can be partners and support learning. I use this statement called parents are partners. What is the difference? And the answer is the difference is you are. In the word parents, there are 7 letters. In the word partners, there are 8. I cannot spell the word partners unless I have one more letter R. Parents has 1 R in it, partners has 2. So the difference is how you are inviting parents to play and to work with their youngster to build on skills. We often say parents are the first and best teacher. They're there from birth. They are there all the way through a child's learning career. But in order to really believe that, we need to support parents as their best teacher. How do you introduce games to families? Many different ways. I did it in kind of a training type mode. When parents came into a program, we would teach them a game that they could go back and play with their children. We were doing a workshop one day about playing with cards, and I was totally amazed that many of our families did not have decks of cards. We were matching colors, we're matching shapes, we're putting numbers in order. And by the time I hit my lunch break that day, I was out in the community trying to find how many decks of cards so I could send decks of cards home with the families that were in our program. So you can have events, you can make it a part of a lesson. You can have them come in and do a make and take, like I showed you the pumpkin kind of looking smiley faces that made a Halloween game. You can do it as a lending library where you make something and you share it to families. Could be homework or could be on a home visit. They can be demonstrated or shared. In the COVID year, we have found many creative ways to reach families, but if you share pictures or if you can demonstrate it on Zoom or any other kind of app of that nature, you have a way to model and to help families to build on it. So model the way the games can be played. I did a research project and I was trying to find out what strategies are effective in engaging families, and found that over 1/3 of families responding to an open-ended question on our survey said, I'll do whatever the teacher asked me to do to support their students' learning. So if families are willing to, then those of us who are impacting their child's learning need to figure out how do we teach them or how do we give them the resources to work with. There are 3 intervention levels my research project took a look at, and they are very similar to the no prop, simple prop, and games with manipulatives, suggestions with prompts, and shared resources. Let me show you how that works. One of the goals that we had was trying to teach opposite directional words. And so we asked parents in the research project at level 1 to receive a suggestion from the staff member that they play a game of hide and seek. And parents were asked to give clues for the child using those opposite directionality words. At level 2, the suggestion with a prompt, we did the same thing, but we put the words into print. So we gave them a small printout of how to play a hide and seek type game, and we gave them the simple prompt to be able to hide. It was just a foam cutout shape that we used. And at level 3, we gave them directional words via a game. So the game is called Which Way, and they were able to name something behind you. Put your hands over your ears, find something you can turn off, close your eyes. So these are all ways to invite the families to participate. What did our research point out? That when we gave the suggestion, we had 9.41 minutes of time accounted for as playing this activity together. But when we gave them the suggestion or the shared resources, we doubled that amount of time. When we asked how many times they played it, less than 1 time per family at level 1, but 2 times for the level 2 with the prompts and with the resources. Which one do I recommend? I recommend you do all 3, but understand when we put resources in their hands, they are going to be more likely to do it. They did them more frequently. more time was spent playing, they involved more family members, and the activities were done more often. So how do you begin with playing games then? You can create your own games if you wish. Bingo was one that was very, very popular with families. So we introduced a number of different types of playing bingo games. So the one in the upper left is a bingo game that was made with pictures. And the idea was when parents came in for a meeting, we had them play bingo and we had them go through the book and find the pictures that they could cross off. And as they played this bingo game, we were able to reinforce to them that we don't need to read the words in a book, that there are many, many ways for children to build vocabulary other than the words printed on the pages, just by looking at the pictures. So if a family was weak on literacy skills, if a family had a child who just didn't sit still very long and they felt uncomfortable with reading, we could show them how books became rich in terms of building literacy anyway. On the lower left, there's a color shape. That was a pizza round, and we put a spinner in the middle of it, and we played color bingo. So children were able to spin and to cover their bingo sheets. Again, this was for some of our younger students. So you'll notice there's only 9 squares on there. There's not 25, but 9 was enough in order for their attention span. In the middle, you find that there's a letter bingo game, and there's also a number. You can laminate the sheets, so you can use erasable pens and you can mark them off, or you can use some type of markers. When we went and did this on home visits, we would take something along like a snack, like oyster crackers or some kind of a snack item that after they had played the game, they could eat the snack. And of course, we would start by sanitizing hands. So just an idea for how you can utilize bingo. The upper right corner is a bingo game we played with the whole school. And this was a way for us to promote family literacy. And each one of those squares was an activity for families to do. It ranged from visit the public library to completing a class homework assignment to reading 5 books with their children. But the idea was that they would win a line and come and celebrate with us. We had at various times served spaghetti dinners. Other times we would have events, family activities. So you decide if there is such a thing as winning a game, what's the rewards to it? There are many ways to make games. We did a lot of path games. One of the activities that we did in the classroom that children just loved was this book, Going on a Bear Hunt. So we decided we needed to have a game about going on a bear hunt. And what our games look like, they were just a laminated file folder. On the front, we would put directions on that would tell them what were the parts that were in the bag so they knew what to send back. We would give them a statement about why this was an important activity. And I think this one says, this is a game, this is a book that children really like in the classroom. But we gave them simple directions, and always we gave an area called more fun things to do. So once they'd finished the bear hunt game, what else could they do in order to build upon the skills that we were introducing with the mat? So what we did is we just used a rubber stamp and we stamped out a path game. But I did say to one of the parents that was in our program, and by the way, we hired her eventually. That's how you find some really awesome people, is through the parents you get to know in your program. But this gal eventually became a staff member. She added the illustrations to this. And from there forward, we did color prints, and we just said, that's an expense we're going to do because this is a cool game, and the kids and the families loved it. Again, you'll notice some movers that are laying on the game on the upper right. They are milk lids. Families would save for us the lids that came off of their gallon containers, and we use those. And there was a dice there, and again, it stamped, it was a block of wood. It's stamped with 4 paw prints on that particular side that's showing. And they would go inside that little plastic bag that you just kind of see behind, and that was the way we toted them back and forth. Okay, for some reason, I am not advancing, Vicki. Now it did. My computer is not cooperating. It wants to scare me. Here's some other path games that we did. You'll notice the one in the upper left, these are just pieces of construction paper. We cut the 11 basic colors and we put them in a basket. And we had parents go through and do an assessment with their children, find out which colors their student knew, which ones needed practice. And we based the game on the colors they needed practicing. And the cube itself is just a piece of construction paper glued onto that cube. In the upper right is a picture of a T game. Our speech therapist identified the t sound is one of those sounds that they were working with a lot of our students. So when we did a workshop and parents came in for the speech program, we gave them a game that we modeled for them that they took home, and they could then continue to practice that with their youngster at home. On the lower right is a game about coins. We found that our kindergarten assessment that our students were expected to know the names of coins, and we had not been practicing that in the classroom. So we decided to make a game so that families could practice at home with their students. And on the left is also a color game. This one was different footprints. We did this one on a home visit. And what we did again, had the student assess with their parents which of those 11 colors they knew with the crayons. Then we use those 6 colors that we wanted to practice. We colored the key on the bottom, and we colored the footprints to be able to move across the path. How do you begin making games? Just start with any kind of generic board. You might be able to find some on the market. We just drew one and we copied it and did it in different formats. But if it's too long of a game, what is shown on the right, you can shorten it for your younger students. On the lower left is a game we called Find It. And this was a game we kind of designed with parents, and we said, what's something you could find in your home? And we always want to introduce words that maybe they don't use on a day-to-day basis. So they would ask their child to find certain things in the kitchen or certain things in the bathroom, and just an exploration type game to involve their family. The one on the right is called Who Am I? The first time we did it, you'll see it on the lower level of that. We just did black and white pictures, and we played it just once or twice with our youngsters, and they're like, but it doesn't look like a penguin, but it doesn't look like a, and the children really relied on the colors. So from that point forward, we always added color to them. We also said, oh, we didn't write what the word was on there. If we're really doing literacy, we should also give them the words. So we're like, oh, duh, that's a great idea. And henceforth made sure that we always added words to our games. What about a fishing game? Kids love to go fishing. This is made with lids. They came off of concentrated juices, and we glued pictures on. This was a front and a back game that we had found a printout of. On the lower left, in terms of making games, there's different types of movers. You can purchase little movers to play games, but buttons and milk lids work really great, as do some of the counting kind of products that you might have a jar of in a classroom. Spinners are also a great way to make a game. Paper plates are really sturdy in order to make a spinner. And by the lines on the edges, the ridges around the plate, it's real easy to divide it into sections to draw lines through. And then on the right, dice, they are just easy to use. I always emphasize using dice that have both numbers and dots, or rotate. Maybe you have a dice that has numbers on it and others that have the dot configurations. Use both so children get to learn both. Game design, adapt what works. If there's something in your program that children like, then figure out, how do we add a new twist to it? Be creative and think of a new way to introduce that game in another format. Always identify what your purpose is and then share it with the users. What are we trying to accomplish? Going back to one of my first questions and saying, what are the skills and ideas your students are practicing? What are the skills we want them to be learning? And then make sure we say to parents, this is a great game to play because it helps your student do this and this. Involve others in planning and doing. Parents would come to me and say, you know, we need a game about, and whenever they'd make those ideas, I'd go, okay, let's think about that. And they would help me plan and create some things to do with that idea. Modify to meet the player's needs. So if it doesn't work on the first time you do it, figure out what are we missing. Like I said, that one game where we didn't have the colors of the animals, we went back and modified it until it worked better. Use materials that families have. We've done many games with egg cartons. Egg cartons can be ways to practice spelling words. It can be ways to practice numbers. And this is just 2 buttons put inside the carton to shake and to come up with different numbers each time. Meet all safety standards. So what kind of safety standards am I talking about? One of the most critical is the size of the pieces. You want to make sure that that size is not something that's going to cause children to choke. There is a product called a choke tube test, and that has 2 dimensions to it. It has both a diameter and it has a height. So if you take the cap off of a pen, you will find that safety standards over time has modified that. There's a long stem on the side. It doesn't just cover the tip of the pen, but that long stem is long enough that it protrudes above the top of that safety tube. And you'll find that they have also, in many cases, added little holes so that air gets through that piece as well to prevent choking. The size of that diameter, it is the size that a milk lid, like from a gallon container, will not fit in it. So that's a good judgment for the diameter for you. But the size that comes off of a soft drink container or a water bottle, those are too small and are choke hazards. So I would not use those. COVID has made us very aware of sanitization. I have been using my games and putting them out in the little library in front of my house, and I have greatly appreciated that choice as I've been able to either use sanitized wipes or wash them to be able to clean them. Make sure that whatever you send out is clean so that families are not passing germs between each other. So those are just a few ideas about safety. Always avoid sharp edges. Cover anything that's sharp with a piece of tape so that that edge is not going to cut a young finger. And even though you might be working with school-age children, I still encourage you to follow these same safety rules, because we don't know when we send something home who in the family is going to be using this activity, and we want to make sure that everyone in the family is safe. What are some ideas about the mechanics of putting together games? Well, first of all, limit the number of parts. When we would send home 26 alphabet letters, I could guarantee you I would be looking for a couple of replacement letters when it came back and was re-inventoried. Know the audience, apply the age rule. In other words, follow the number of players per age and also the length of time that they play. Establish some kind of an organization system so that you have a way to store things. The picture that you see on the right there is from a public library. They had a shelving area that had a rod across it, and they hung on that all different kinds of kits of different varieties. But that's how they kept things organized. Always provide a parts list. Tell them what is in that kit. We found that clear bags allowed us to see through and to be able to inventory the pieces. And for things that were opaque, I learned to put pockets on the outside so that you could quickly inventory it and it wasn't going to be a hard task to be able to do that. Define what the purpose is for the game. Write clear directions. Evaluate. Define your outcomes. Figure out if the game's really working, and if not, what can you do to retune it? Define the value of this experience and the skills that are learned so that you know which games are doing which. If you have a student doing counting, you should have 4 or 5 different games that you can send home for that skill. If you have another student who's working on rhyming words, you want a variety of games so they can continue to fine-tune the skills that they need work on. Suggest ways to expand the experience. I call that more fun things to do. Sometimes families did them, sometimes families didn't, but if I gave them the opportunity and the information was there, they could use it. Plan for maintenance and continuation. We constantly had a bag for each game so that if something went missing, I didn't have to go fire up the laminator to make a new piece. We would have the pieces in stock. but parents help me stock those. Parents help me to create those. You might find that there's a school group or a scouting group or an after school kind of an activity group that you could help utilize in order to create things. Public libraries often have older students that hang around the library and are honored to help out in some positive way. So think about how you can engage, who's in your program, and how they can help to extend what you're doing. Make directions clear and easy to follow. There was a research project that I read last April, and this was from researchers from Harvard in an opinion article that they wrote. But they said parents can be quite effective teachers when given easy to implement, engaging activities. Materials sent home for parents work best if their directions are both simple to read and easy to follow. So how else do we support users? I call that area extending the learning as more fun things to do. Come up with a way of saying that. You might want to use your program name, your program mascot, figure out what you can do to catch people's attention, but give them some of those ideas so they can keep taking that idea and dig further in building the skill. Always give a parts list, tell them what they're looking for to send back. I had an email on Sunday night from a grandparent saying, help, I've lost the dice to the game my grandchildren are playing. Can I get another one? Well, yes, I could get her another one, but unfortunately I went to the post office and I went, my conscience doesn't allow me to send a $1 piece and charge her $4 for shipping. So I sent her a note and said, I would be glad to, but are you sure? And she sent me a wonderful message this morning and said, the part's been found. I don't need the dice, but thank you. So sometimes just having that list so they know what they're looking for and what goes back in helps the maintenance of the whole process. And then there's another area called supporting learning. What are we telling parents that they can do in order to build on learning? This is a game called Dress Up, and I just grabbed this one off the shelf today. Listen what the learning hints say for this one. This game encourages players to use a variety of words for the things we wear. A wide vocabulary will help in everyday conversations and later in reading. And on the more fun things to do, the suggestion on this one says, play this game again and have each player share information about the item pictured. Say, for example, I wear a jacket when I go outside. So just giving those other ideas can help to extend families and what they're doing. But do take time to evaluate the effectiveness of what you're doing. Did the players benefit from the experience? This could be done as a poll to parents coming in for a program and saying, hey, I'm going to ask you some questions about the last learning activity we sent home. It could be a printed survey that you put together. It could be a phone call to parents. It could be a conversation you have when you have an opportunity to visit with parents and say, just give me some of your thoughts and how this is working for you. Who can give the feedback? Have siblings give you feedback. Have the parents give you feedback. Have grandparents give you feedback. There are so many people who touch each of our students' lives. We have to figure out how we get the feedback from all of them and help that to build where we want that youngster going. But document and use feedback. It is so powerful when I can say, well, we had this many kits that were used and we know they spent this much time on it. So we did a survey this one particular year 3 different times. And the last survey result of the year was results that I was able to share with the rest of the staff to bolster their participation in getting the kits out. 85% were played 2 or more times. 100% responded that they read the books that were in the kits. 81% were used by moms, 41% with siblings, 29% with dads, and 13% with grandparents. 66% did the enrichment activities. When I can tell my staff that kind of information, it helps them to say, okay, this is worth it. I didn't realize they enjoyed them that much. If I have results like that, I can also go to a vendor or can go to someone in my community and say, hey, we'd like to extend the kits that we're sending out from our program. Might you be willing to be involved with this? We could put a sticker on there that said donations for this learning kit are provided by. And you might find, for example, that a dentist might provide toothbrushes and toothpaste and so forth for a kit you would be sending out on health related ideas. So think broadly, think about creative ideas about who I can reach out to and who I can get feedback from. Each one of the kits that I have has an activity page that I can send home with it. The top half is always an area that says an activity for them to do, but the bottom half is an area where I say, what do they know and what needs practice? And if I keep track of the ideas that the parents say, well, they need practice doing this skill or that skill, the next time I have an opportunity for a face-to-face with the families, I've got ideas to discuss with them about how we're working together to advance them towards the next level. So this is some of the materials that I have created. My menu book is shown there. On the right is a kindergarten game that I actually designed when some principals made the suggestion that the preschoolers should go home with flashcards at the end of the year. And developmentally appropriate does not anywhere mention flashcards. So we created a game and that's shown on the bottom. I also have some products that I call door hangers because there were days families missed me on home visits. And I humbly came back to the program and said, now what? What do I do when I miss them? So we started doing door hangers. And then of course, the learning kits that I've showed you some of the examples of, I do them in English and bilingual. And each one goes home with the book and the activity, but notice all the bright colors. The youngsters were so quick to say, but I have the green one. I want the orange one this time. And so they could give us direction about which ones they wanted. So the kits are on fabric. They can be used as a lending library or they can be used in a classroom. Vicki is working with me, and as I'm working towards retirement, she is looking at how she's going to continue to produce these materials. And one of the ideas she's toying with is it might be a nice giveaway to families when we don't have that opportunity to have parents coming in and checking things out. So contact Vicki about where things are going with that because she has some ideas she's starting to explore in that. But again, they are available in English or bilingual Spanish English. And don't reinvent the wheel. I had the chance to talk with some people in Carolina. They gave some wonderful, wonderful resources. So I've listed them there. And I had already put the slide together for your handout. So this one's not on there. So I'm just going to leave it kind of set there for a minute. And I'm going to ask you to go ahead and to jot down some of these ideas, or we can share to you the slide deck after today's presentation. So we'll be able to send that out to you if that would be helpful to you, but some really great things. I highly recommend the last one. It's something called Learning Heroes. It's a group that's been around since probably 2017 and are really trying to help bridge the connection between families and schools. And they have found some great ideas and give information to support both the education side and the parent side. But there's a readiness check. Sometimes parents say, I don't know, is my child ready for second grade? They have some great resources there that you can utilize to take a look at. I also asked you at the beginning to share ideas of things that you would take back that you could implement into the work that you do. Research says that unless you take that idea and you start moving it into action in the next couple of days, that within 3 weeks, it will be kind of dismissed from your thinking. So I'm going to ask you to make sure that you committed to writing a couple of ideas that you want to take back or some ideas to introduce to some other people. Sometimes just having another person on your staff on board and saying, hey, this is what I want to do. What do you think? How could we possibly do that? It would make a big difference. And games can be a part of so many different aspects of your program. It can be a part of parents coming into the building, and it can be a part of your outreach for parents who don't get a chance to come into your program. So just think of the many different ways that you can make learning fun and games. So put some ideas in the presentation. If you could share your ideas with each other, I would greatly appreciate that. That way we can kind of build on it. Vicki, there been any questions that came in? I don't think I invited people well to ask questions. Are there any questions we should be addressing?
Actually, no, we just have a few comments. Focus on SEL. I love the idea of keeping it simple and inviting and equipping parents with resources and helping understand how it supports learning and development. A couple of folks really enjoyed the presentation. Laura Lay said, thank you for the shout out, Bev. And let's see, Play Singo is another way to improve listening and memory.
If not everybody's familiar with Zingo, do look for that. It's a game that they produce in so many different variations, from sight words to, I can't even think of all the ways. I've played the sight word many times with my grandchildren as they've been growing up for years, and it's a fun game. Look for that one. You'll find it in a toy store.
Then Julia loves the little library idea.
Yeah, I put games out there. My husband is kind of the keeper of the games that are out there. We have circulated so many games, and we have a bin on our front steps. So ones that have been used get to be put in there, and they get to come in and get a bath and be sanitized, and to be able to put them back out again. But we've been in this community for only about 2.5 years, and people go, "Oh, you're the lady with the games." And so I'm gaining notoriety in my neighborhood with the games, and have met some really wonderful people on in my neighborhood as well. So, okay,
really good idea. Really quick, keep ideas handy in an apron pockets on a lanyard or on a ring in a bucket next to group time areas.
Cool idea.
I thought so.
Yeah. If we can help you with a certificate of attendance, let Vicki know. She will be posting the recorded session that other people can take advantage of it. This is the 3rd session we've done. The first one was a menu for successful family engagement. And the second one was about communicating effectively. Those 2 are available as well. Just send a note off to Vicki in the chat, and she can make sure that she forwards those on to you. We don't have another one designed at this time, but we'll get to that. So we hope we can invite you again to another session. Thank you for your time and for encouraging fun and learning.